Winemaking's difficult because there are no right answers. It's an infinite number of possibilities and flavors, and it's a craft that will never be mastered. It's a journey. It's not just a product.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Wine Stream with Palmaz Vineyards. I'm Florencia Palmaz, and with me every week, always, my brother Christian Palmaz and my sister-in-law Jessica. Hi, y'all.
How's it going?
I love the new music. It's got all southern twang in me coming right out, I can tell.
It's good to change it up a little bit.
Absolutely. We've got a great edition for you guys this week. We're looking forward to showing you a little bit about the vineyard, and also we have an extraordinary guest. We have Master Sommelier and Director of Wine for Gary Danko, an amazing restaurant in San Francisco, one of the finest and most respected in the country for their service. An absolute definition of haute cuisine. Jeremiah Morehouse will be joining us shortly. Before I get to that, I want to thank Lifesize System for being our platform and allowing us to do this every week. And Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about the vineyard? It's full-blown summer. It's amazing, and we haven't shared with everyone about 4 weeks how the vineyard's progressing, and it is like totally COVID crazy out there. And I mean that in that I haven't gotten my hair cut since COVID started, and neither did the vineyard.
Well, it was time. Unfortunately, the vineyard doesn't have to wait for the salons to open. So
Totally.
we are, now heading into topping, right? So the activity now is it's kind of a delicate balance between wanting to do it on time, but not wanting to do it too early. Because if we top the vine too early, then you get a lot of lateral growth, and then those are leaves you're going to have to deal with later. And you forget how quickly clusters show up, and that's kind of the amazing thing that we really have.
The little babies are out there. It is so cute and fully formed. We've had a beautiful fruit set, at least so far what I've seen. So
yes, yeah, it's a great berry set. Pollination was fine this year. It's amazing how quickly you go from flowers to berries. And so now, the task is as we talked about, it's topping, right? So it's a labor intensive process, but it's getting it done at the right time. Fortunately, Mother Nature's been very cooperative. It's been really, kind of a wonderful spring to summer transition. And what that also means is grafting. And we have parts of the vineyard sometimes that we graft. And so these are areas that get replanted.
Hold on. Before you go to grafting, I just want to say one thing. Talk to us about, because I know this is so delicate. We emphasize all the time how labor intensive it is and how critical each one of these steps are. Can you tell us and explain to us why the timing of topping, which is essentially, right, the vineyard's buzz cut, they get a haircut before I do. But tell us why that's so delicate, why that's so critical for the development of the vines.
Definitely. So it has to do, again, with this kind of genetic response that occurs when you have imagine a vine that's growing, right? It wants to go up and it wants to go out, and when you have the issue of doing this too soon, then the vine basically deals with that and starts producing leaves and shoots in the laterals, so in the side of the trellis. And we want to manage that. So we're also leafing. So, as you'll notice, sometimes you'll drive through the vineyard, you'll notice that the morning side, this is the side of the vine that receives the more sunlight in the morning versus the afternoon side. We're typically leafing the morning side, so you'll actually have more light coming into the fruit zone on the morning. And if we are topping too early, you can disrupt that process.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you for the clarification. I apologize. As you were chatting, our kitchen staff just came in, miraculously dropped an entire hors d'oeuvre set for me. So,
that's I love it when that happens.
I got snacks. It's like tasting room fairies. Wonderful.
So
okay.
let's talk about grafting. So
Absolutely.
this is a really cool part of the time of year. So in some parts of the vineyard we do replants. These are areas where we basically rip out a piece of the vineyard and replant. So what you're looking at is rootstock. And the rootstock is grafted onto the ultimate clone. So the rootstock is often the hybridized or the engineered root portion. And these grafters are really, really brilliant artisans that do this process. So in his toolbox, he's got the buds. And what he'll do is he'll cut like a V-shape groove into the side of the vine. And you'll see him, he just put that V-shaped groove. He'll actually lick the bud. And then you'll see he'll notch the bottom. And that's actually to help the vine not push that bud out with its kind of vascular system. You'll get a lot of juices that'll come out through that cut. So you don't want it to push out. So he'll actually nick the bottom closer to the ground. And then you'll see him tie it off to secure that bud in place with that biodegradable tape that they use. And then amazingly, we cut off the whole portion of the rootstock. And from that point, from that bud, will become the new vine. It's just a magical process. You never get used to it. Yeah. And
it's the surgery of the vineyard, and it's a lost art. There are so few people left in the world, honestly, that field graft like this. And I just love watching these guys do this. When I ran into Kui last week and he said, "Oh, we're grafting on Saturday." This was Saturday. I immediately I had to go and see it, and it's always a pleasure to watch them work because it's really delicate, and nurseries these days have supplanted most field grafting with what they call benchtop work, which limits your variety of clones, right? We can't really pick exactly what we want, what flavors and what rootstock combinations when the nursery decides what they hold in inventory. And in this way, we actually are propagating across our own clones from that vineyard exactly where we want to go put them back. It's one of those beautiful arts. Yeah. It
is an amazing art. And oftentimes they do this, what's called bench grafting, right? So it's done at the nursery, and we're one of the, we still celebrate doing it in the vineyard like it's supposed to be done, but it has its benefits too, right? So the avoidance of viruses. So sometimes the nurseries, they can have their own little pandemic, and sometimes the rootstock, when they bench graft, can come with some disease. And so we love kind of the known quantity of working with our own rootstock and doing it right here in house. So it's a pretty cool thing. It never gets old watching those guys do that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, let's call up Jeremiah. While you're dialing in, I'll let everybody know a little bit about Jeremiah Morehouse. He's a master sommelier, certified master sommelier, as well as the wine director of Gary Danko Restaurant. It is one of the one of the most extraordinary restaurants, known for their haute cuisine, one of the real pioneers of just top quality service and California fine dining. Gary Danko's got that touch, his Ritz-Carlton background, and then of course running this restaurant for as many years as he has. They are 12 years now running. They have a 5-star diamond rating. They're Relais Chateau, and of course Michelin rated, and have won almost everything that James Beard has to offer: best chef, best new restaurant, and best service. And best service is what I really wanted to focus on. Jeremiah, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi. So, Jeremiah, one of the things that always struck me every time I go to Gary Danko's is how welcome I feel, how relaxed I feel, and yet how formal the service is. You guys have that magic touch of being both friendly and formal. Tell us a little bit about, what's the secret behind that? How did you strike that perfect balance?
Well, I think it's something that, if you look at chef's history, the restaurant itself has been open 20 plus years now. And it really was the driving force of, there's so many great restaurants in the world, but the thing that can really set themselves apart is that level of hospitality. And I think, myself personally and overall the mindset of the restaurant as well is, if you can deliver that added level of hospitality, then it feels like you're at home even when you're not. And one of the things that's just so important is to have that connection with a guest, because I like to refer to our guests a lot of the times as friends, because they're interested in more than just having a good plate of food. They really do kind of see themselves as coming to Gary Danko because it's a place where they can feel at home and they can feel comfortable. So it's for us, it's kind of second nature at this point, but we love doing it.
So, attached to that, one of the things that I've always admired so much is just the suave and ease that all sommeliers have at tableside service. I have to confess, and I want you to walk us through this. How is it that you can open up a bottle of wine so much more elegantly than I can? I mean, I've been known to, I've done a lot of strange angles in getting a bottle open.
No, of course. I think it's one of those, I think everybody's a little bit different when it comes to kind of the approach, but I think the important thing is to kind of, have your own kind of ease about things. And I think that comes most specifically from repetition. Part of the saying, I'm sure it's true in this and true in pretty much anything, is, sometimes you just have to be thrown into the deep end, and if you don't, swim, you'll sink kind of thing. But I think a big part of
Jeremiah, are you saying that I need to drink more? I mean, I can take the challenge if you need me to.
I mean, I'm not promoting that specifically, but I think that, repetition is the key. Yes, absolutely. So, speaking of which, I'm thirsty, so I was thinking about putting a little bit of some Riesling in my glass.
Done. I'm right along with you. I'm following the master today.
Awesome. Well, so I've got a bottle of the Riesling here, the 2017 vintage, not opened or anything like that. And I thought we'd just kind of walk through the general, when I teach and I train people, I try and go through the standard steps of procedure for the Court of Master Sommeliers. But I say that with the adage of any restaurant, any scenario you work in, you have to kind of change a little bit. You have to modify based upon what your environment allows and kind of the formal. But a couple things that we can do just to kind of talk about is, first of all, we've got the bottle. I've got my wine key. I always like to make sure that I've got a wine key that's got a really nice knife to it. I think the knife is one of the most important things because, especially tableside, having that really jagged, I'm sure everyone's been at a restaurant where they come and, they'll pour you a taste of a glass of a wine and the foil looks all jagged, and that just doesn't leave a great, first impression upon you of, how do they approach their wine service? So for me, it's always important to kind of get off on that good start. So to get off to the good start, one of the things, if I was talking about steps to service, is I always like to emphasize you should point the label towards the guest that you're opening it for, because you always want to make sure that they're the ones that are kind of watching you and seeing what's happening. The big thing is I'll kind of grab the neck of the bottle so that it's secure and comfortable. And I think, if I'm doing it where I'm standing and the guest is looking at me seated, I always kind of want to try and position it about eye level so that they're not having to look up or they're not looking down or anything like that. And for me, I have two real quick simples. I start in the front and I just kind of go around as much as I can, and then I'll flip and I'll just come back around and I'll go across the blade. And I'm going, not sure if we can see, but I'm going on the second lip. I'm going under the lip.
That's the first thing I do wrong. I do the top lip, and I've been told that that's not the right place to be. So second lip, huh?
There's a little bit, if there is a little bit of a drip, the saying or the adage is you don't want that drip interacting with the foil because, you know, what if it's a bottle that's been in the cellar a little bit? It may have dust particles, it may have things like that. So it's kind of goes towards a cleanliness, but also just an aesthetic. So I will have done my one cut in the front and then drawn around on that lip. And you can use that lip as kind of a guiding place to keep it straight. And then I just like to do one tear up such that I can remove the foil nice and easy like that.
Yeah, mine already doesn't look like that. Okay. I got a big tear on mine already.
If I was doing this in a restaurant, you know, the foil then at that point kind of goes into a pocket and have discarded away. Hey, that works too. And then we'll go in. So I always, you know, I know there's a million different designs of wine keys, things like that. Some have one hinge, some have two hinges, things like that. I've over the years gotten comfortable with just the standard kind of one hinge. But the two hinge is
I'm
often,
a double hinger, yeah.
And that's kind of referred to as the waiter's corkscrew as well. So because it is easy, fast, and has a lot of accuracy to it. So still kind of keeping the label forthright. Again, if I was adhering to court standards, I would be wiping the cork and the lip of the bottle after removing.
Right.
And then we can go in and retrieve the cork. So
you twist the corkscrew and not the bottle? I am terrible. I twist both. Okay, so you're not twisting the bottle, I see, but much slicker. All right. And I make a lot of noise. Is that okay? Is there like a noise standard?
Well, I mean, every cork's a little bit different. I would say you don't want to hear a splash because that means that the cork's gone into the bottle, so that's probably a bad sign, but I think you're okay.
Okay.
Now for me, I'm right-handed, so I am wanting my lever to be on my dominant or strong side.
Okay. Yep,
Just
left-handed.
for me, the way that I extract. So for here, I've got the corkscrew in, it's levered in a good position. I'll easily switch hands, and then the magic. One nice and easy pull, and then from there, you can kind of slowly extract, and you've got a cork.
So Jeremiah, tell us a little bit. I mean, you know, this is, you opened up a 17. That one's easy, right? It's got a nice 54 millimeter, you know, top level hand sorted cork. How do you handle, you know, let's say something that's older than 20 years. Do you always go for the also?
I generally do. My rule that I like to utilize overall is that if a cork is, you know, in that kind of 10+ year age range,
right,
that I think, especially if I'm in a dining room setting and, you know, something to the essence of, you know, for those that have dined at Gary Danko, you know, it's a fast-paced environment, so I don't have, you know, 18 minutes to kind of finagle and ease the cork out. So the also is kind of that safety net, so to speak, that I often like to use. So without a doubt.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to, you can show us that when we open the 06. So Riesling, we finally got into it. I make a ton more noise than you do. I feel like such the squeaky, like a squeaky mouse here opening a bottle.
That was really loud flow.
I know. I'm embarrassed. Is it my corkscrew that's wrong, or am I doing it?
I think I don't think it has anything to do with that. You know, some corks make a little bit of noise. If they're a little bit young, they will kind of be a little bit more expanded, a little bit tighter, so to speak. And so it's not uncommon by any means.
Okay, so I don't have to be embarrassed about squeaking.
No,
you didn't
absolutely.
lose points.
No. I don't lose points for squeaking. Good.
You're still doing quite well on the score sheet. Absolutely.
Oh, but it's always worth the reward, right? So pretty.
Oh, absolutely. This is a fun wine. I mean, you know, old adage, I'm sure is true, and I'm sure most everybody that's viewing this and watching has heard from a sommelier over the time that Riesling is a sommelier's best friend, and it's really true. It's just such a delicious wine. You can have it with so many different foods. You can have it on its own. They can be made into sparkling wines. They can be made bone dry. They can be made off dry, all the way to dessert sweet. There's just so much application for them. It's really fantastic.
I've always been really attracted to, particularly being a Cabernet house, we are really working within the Cabernet bandwidth of flavors all the time, and really spending most of our time, especially in the cellar, tasting through the reds and the tannins and the acids attributed to all of that. And then to be able to just get a little reset and a little refuge in Riesling is, it's just, for me, it's such a joy. It's the reset button for us. So tell us, what do you think of the 17? I always love to hear the notes and the sort of walk us through the sommelier's logic pattern for this wine.
For sure. Well, knowing what it is and not tasting it in a blind setting, I have a little bit of a heads up, of course, but whenever I'm tasting a wine, there's a few things, especially when I know what the wine is, there's a few things that I like to think about. So first off, it's 2017 vintage. What was happening in 2017? So for instance, I've lived in San Francisco in the Bay Area for a number of years. I am a Northern California kid. And so I know in 2017, it got pretty warm towards the end of the fall or the end of the summer, into that kind of Indian summer type. So I don't want to say an expectation, but I have an idea that there could be some warmth or some ripeness of fruit here. And but I'm also thinking about, this is Riesling, so I have kind of some classic markers, if you will, whether it be citrus or whether it be stone fruits, whether, kind of in that peach, apricot, nectarine camp. Riesling is a grape for me that really does carry and translate acidity very well. And so I will generally expect, whether the wine is bone dry or has sweetness, that it'll have a high level of acidity to carry through the palate. So those are kind of a couple things that I just generally think about when I'm thinking about Riesling. And I think it really kind of delivers on the palate and on the nose. Style-wise, the nose, the florals, are balanced. I get a little bit of some ripe citrus. I get that kind of just kind of perfectly fresh, ripe orchard fruit. But then for me, those floral notes that kind of linger in and add complexity and add depth to the wine, almost like those light honeysuckle and kind of peach blossom type things.
Absolutely. I always think of, for me, Riesling must, at least our Rieslings, I know we've had a great vintage, and this is one of those, when it's, in my mind, it expresses that sort of summer night floral aroma, the smell of flowers at night, when you walk through and you can smell the honeysuckle right after sunset. If you walk past one of those, sort of a midsummer night's dream, imagine. I love floral components interlaced with fruit. I mean, for me, that's when you're hitting an interesting balance and complexity in the wines.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, there's so many different grapes in the world, and, obviously not everybody is going to like every single varietal, but I think what's important is, I have to do it every day when I'm analyzing a wine for, a pairing or a by the glass program, or to add to the cellar, is, does the wine showcase what I want, expect, and how does it perform, And I think a big part of that is the complexity of a wine. If a wine is very one-noted, you're going to kind of have that, and then it's just going to fall off. And I think what's great here is there is those levels of flavors. You get fruit, you get florals, you get minerality, you get an essence. There's things that are mingling together. One of the knocks that I have on California Riesling is sometimes it can get way too ripe, and you get kind of that. If anyone out there has ever had those like peach ring candies, and they just have that kind of sweet and kind of artificial peachy flavor. That's one of the things that I absolutely am not a fan of. in Rieslings. And I mean, I want peach, I want that stone fruit, but I don't want it to be kind of over the top. And I think this is a great example of taking it to that level to where you're showcasing the vintage and the region, but you're doing it in a really elegant and really balanced way, which is fantastic.
Well, it's a good point, because you can't grow it anywhere, right? And that's why, Riesling needs a little more limited environment from what we typically see on the valley floor. And that's why, for us, it only grows at the 1,200-foot elevation, nestled, much less sunlight exposure, all volcanic rock. It's really no topsoil. And you're dead on about the residual sugar comment you made. It is about 0.8. So, it's just barely perceptible at that point. So Jeremiah, tell us a little bit, like, what for you is the residual sugar level, I mean, does so much. At what point does it start to really become noticeable, and how does that play with the acid level?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think it will kind of depend a little bit wine by wine. I think it overall, like you were mentioning, it comes to what the region shows. So if you look at, as I like to think about classic regions in the world for Riesling, obviously throughout Germany, Alsace in France, parts of Austria, I think California and Washington are upcoming. And then, of course, you have a good kind of pocket contingency in Australia. The wines can vary, vary so much. And I think what it comes down to is, what is the total acidity level and how does that play in? Because if you have a wine that is, grown in a place like the Mosel in Germany, which is a very, very different climate than Napa Valley,
Sure.
You have a different perception of what the sweetness levels will be and what the acid levels will be. It's very, very difficult to get a wine from the Mosel to, 13% alcohol. And if you do, you are going towards the driest of styles almost always. Whereas in a warmer region where you have riper fruit like Napa Valley, you can have a little whisper of that residual sugar and it will add depth to the wine. For me, it's a matter of, you have that ripeness of fruit, so the wine would almost be a bit disjointed if it was bone dry with no residual sugar, because the acid and the fruit would be almost kind of fighting each other a little bit for dominance. Whereas
you are music to my ears. I hear that all the time. And a lot of consumers that don't understand the relationship between New World Riesling and Old World Riesling will judge us for leaving a little sugar behind. And I always say, no, we have to have it, or the wines feel dumb. They feel flat. That little bit of sugar lifts everything. It lifts the aromas. And like you said, because we're ripe enough, we can do it. And I'm sure that in other regions, they would have loved to have been able to leave it, but they don't have the weather for it. It's a hint. You got to stay subtle with it, or it goes too far and it turns into Blue Nun that we all have bad memories of. So, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's move on to reds. And before you open up the 06, I do have a question. Actually, Stephen Way here, one of our viewers, is asking, do you use a different corkscrew when you open magnums and 3 liters? And do you change your strategy when you're dealing with the bigger bottles?
Yes, so magnums, not so much, just because the magnum size bottle will traditionally have the same, neck diameter and cork size for the most part. When you start to get into 3 liters and larger, that's generally going to be, specialty made bottles with larger diameter corks. If the cork is fairly young, then, I don't have any problems most of the time using a traditional wine key. If the cork is especially old, then to where I would want to use an Osso, then sometimes you have to get a little creative. And I can kind of, where maybe instead of using like one Osso, I'm using multiple, and I'm kind of leveraging them against each other and using, I actually have a tool called the Durand here. which is absolutely fantastic, especially for really, really old bottles. But before this tool came out, what I would do is I would use like my normal wine key and I would stabilize the cork, and then I would use the Osso against it for fear of a cork kind of becoming very brittle or ripping or something like that. So, you know, somebody out there that had $1 million idea that was a lot smarter than I made that device, got a patent on it, and now is making sommeliers happy the world over. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing that. Oh my gosh. And I'm so grateful that Stephen asked that question, because I had no idea about the Durant. I'm going to check that out. But even the trick, like you said, of the wine key plus the Osso that's a wonderful suggestion. I know every time, you know, we're opening up a 3-liter, it's always, oh God, here we go. And especially, you know, we open up a lot of older ones because we've got them in the cellar, and it's a nerve-wracking experience because the pressure is so high if you fail on a big bottle.
Everybody's probably watching you and waiting.
Always.
Yeah.
Can we just eat some wine already? It's, you know, so absolutely.
Okay, so walk us through service of an Osso. I have a really ugly one, and I have to confess, when I pulled it out of my drawer, I thought, oh, I'm not even doing that on camera. No way, mine's too ugly. So I love your elegant one.
No problem. So I've got a bottle of the 06 right here. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. So just a kind of a little fresh, quick recap. I'm going to cut the foil the same way that I would, kind of starting in the front with a nice cut, going back around, a nice cut, one cut up the foil just to kind of remove it. And
Jeremiah, can we ask you to tilt your camera up a little bit so we can see your face?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry. There we go.
Oh,
perfect.
There we go.
Ooh, and you've got some lovely bottles there on the back wall.
Yeah,
very nice.
A few fun bottles that my fiance and I have collected over the years that have a sentimental value to us.
Oh, that's
fantastic.
Beautiful. We all have a few empty
some.
bottles stashed on bookshelves. You know you love your wines when you keep the old bottles around.
Yeah, we've got kind of some good stuff up there, to say the least. So
Nice.
Perfect. So I've done the wipe, and at this point, opening up an old bottle, if I was going to kind of go through decanting and everything, I would light my candle, all that. I know some people use kind of the LED, the fancy flashlights, or their flashlight on their phone, which works well. But here, what we've got, so I've got my Osso, and I've got my 2 prongs.
Okay.
I'm stationed and ready to go. So I will take my first prong, and I will just slowly kind of brace it into the cork. You know, I've probably got millimeter or 2 in, maybe a centimeter, and then kind of position it on the other side, and then kind of do the same. So it's kind of stationed in there. Now, the important thing here that I think a lot of people do is, you know, you have to be gentle, because imagine, you know, this cork has been in this bottle, you know, the 06, so we're looking at 10 plus years that this cork has been in this bottle. So it's been in a cellar, it's been, you know, kind of preserving this wine. So we need to, you know, as I like to say, we need to show it a little respect. So what I always say, what I'll always do is I use the inside of the Osso as kind of a brace, and then I just slowly start to rock. And then that rocking is kind of, instead of putting direct pressure onto the cork as a whole, I'm pressuring one side, getting a little leverage, pressuring the other side, getting a little leverage, such to the point that I can get to. And usually I know if I get to the point where my finger is very close to or touching the cork, I know that on most all corks, unless they're the really, 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 really long ones, that I've got enough leverage. From this point, I've got the bottle standing upright. Whether it was in a basket, out of a cellar, or standing upright, I've had this standing up for about a day or so now to stabilize. I'm going to hold the bottle pretty tightly with my left hand because, again, I'm right-handed, and I'm going to start to extract. So, and that's just, for me, it's light turning, and pulling. And I turn first because I want to make sure that I'm getting any clearance. You know, cork may stick a little bit to the side of the bottle. Again, it's been in there a while. So we're just turning and turning. And then once I get a good leverage on it, then I can kind of start to manually pull it. And then for me, what I like to do, especially if the cork is really, really old and I'm worried about the little bit of the end kind of snapping off, I'll actually kind of use the tongs, and I will pinch a little bit, and I will slowly kind of pull and ease its way out. Oh, sorry about that.
Gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I never thought about grabbing the prongs. I always tend to work just from the top, but that's a great suggestion. I like that a lot. I'm going to try that.
So I have to ask, because the operation guy needs to know, how did the cork do?
Yeah.
Perfect. Look at that. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. So, and then, you know, you would do a little wipe onto the neck because you've got a little bit of sediment kind of built up on the cork from it being on the wine for a little while. And you've got an 06 open and ready to go.
Awesome.
Love it.
So, made it look so easy.
Laura and Aaron Brock are asking candle. I think they're asking for clarification about the use of a candle. If you could just clarify that just a smidge.
Yeah, so that's going towards the process of decanting the wine, which, you know, kind of, I've got a decanter here that I use kind of as an everyday decanter at home. And that goes towards, if, you know, we decant for a couple of reasons. One, we decant to get the wine off of its sediment. If you look really closely at the cork, you can kind of see there's a little bit of sediment built up. And what that is that's going to be, you know, a very natural thing that you're going to find in red wines as they age, is a little bit of sediment. Don't be afraid. It's a good thing more than anything else. And you use the candle as a backlight for when you're decanting. So if I was kind of going through the decanting process here, I would have a candle staged directly under the neck and base of the shoulder of the bottle, and that would give me a backlight, such that as you're kind of standing over the wine and looking, you can see that the wine, you can see the sediment start to build up in the shoulder and the neck of the bottle, such that what you end up with in the decanter is what we would call clear wine, or wine free of any sediment. So that's a big reason why we decant, and why the candle is a necessary part of it. It's not, you know, to warm up the wine as you pour it so that it's up from cellar temperature or anything like that. It's not because sommeliers like to play with fire table side or anything.
Oh, are you sure? There may be a little bit of that.
I mean, I have worked at Gary Danko 6 years, and I have done my share of flambés table side over the years. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. It's one of the things we love about this format is people can ask questions, so we always want to make sure to address questions as they come along. So please proceed.
Excellent. So shall I decant?
Yes, sure.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what I'm going to do is, rather than lighting one of the beautiful scented candles that we have around the apartment, I am going to turn on my flashlight on my phone and use that as my backlight, because I'm at home and I don't have to follow the standards. And so I've got my light set here. I'm sure you can probably see it as I move my hand over it or not. I've got my bottle, and the holding of the bottle will totally depend. You know, you can hold it by the label at this point because you're doing service to it. You're not servicing for the guest, so to speak. You can hold it at the base if you feel comfortable. It's really, you know, this is one of those things of how do you feel most comfortable going through the process. And so I'll hold it here. I've got my decanter. Again, I'm right-handed, so it's in my right hand. I've got my decanter here. And then I will just slowly start to pour, and kind of keeping it at a slow angle such that the wine comes at a nice even flow. You don't, want to totally turn the bottle upside down and invert it or anything like that. Because again, we're looking for any sediment that may be occurring we're looking for those things that, we want to keep in the bottle to keep the wine clear. And so I'm getting about, halfway through. And this is always one of my favorite parts of going through a service exam is when you're decanting a bottle of wine, there's that they're going to throw questions at you. They're going to ask you, why are you doing this? Can you recommend a cocktail? What's your favorite episode of Seinfeld? All those kinds of things that, they really try and throw you off. And so
it's part of the exam is to actually see if you can talk while doing all of this on other subjects.
Well, absolutely. I think, they want to make sure and they want to see that you can operate on multiple levels. And I'm getting pretty close, and I'm going to catch a little bit of sediment there. And I've got her. And
cool. So tell us, just for the benefit, here at the winery, we've never decant any of the bottles when we're doing tastings, partly because we never wanted to manipulate a wine, to a customer's expectation. I always wanted to make sure that what they're tasting here in the tasting room tastes like what will happen at home if they just pop the cork and drink it. Now, when I'm at home, I absolutely decant. I decant a lot of our wines because I know that benefit. Walk us through when you like to decant versus when you don't decant. What's your decisions personally for that?
Well, I think sometimes it kind of comes towards, you have to think about what's the wine and then what's the environment that it's going to be enjoyed in. If I had a 66 Mondavi cab, I would look at it, I would say, should I decant that? Well, if it's 6 or 8 people enjoying that bottle of wine as a tasting, then I probably would, just because they're going to open it, enjoy it, and kind of see it. If it's, a couple sitting down to enjoy a bottle of wine over the course of a meal, I might kind of think about it a little bit differently because, we talk a lot about how a wine peaks. And you want, people always talk about, you should drink a wine when it's at its peak, or this wine will peak at this. Well, I think, there's the long term and then there's the short term. And a lot of wines do need a little bit of air. But I think a lot of wines, that air can easily be achieved by getting it in a glass and giving it a good swirl, letting it open up that way. And then I think there are others to where you need to go. I mean, I would say with, since we're talking about Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, I think young Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, especially in the setting that I operate in, which is, the dining experience, 2 to 3 hour window, needs air a little bit more so than maybe say like a 30-year-old or something like that Cabernet Sauvignon. But then again, it's great varietal driven. So like me personally, Pinot Noir is a great varietal that I very, very, very rarely decant because it's a delicate wine, and over aerating those wines can sometimes be of detriment. Same thing with white wine. I actually decant white wine a lot of the time, depending upon the style and the region and such. It's not uncommon for me to take what I would consider a reductive style Burgundy or a very, very young Riesling or something like that, and splash it, do a little into a decanter, back into the bottle, kind of double decant, just to kind of, kick it with a little bit of air and get it breathing a bit. So.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I knew that you were going to have just an amazing perspective on that question. I've always lived by the edict that if I'm buying a very special bottle of wine, and especially older vintages, I never decanted them. And I did it mainly from the advice of a sommelier. I never really thought through it, but one of the things that I've learned to appreciate so much about especially older wines is I want to see that transition. As a winemaker, I want to see it go from tight to tired. Right, in the 2-3 hours. And I like having every glass or half glass or even sip transition. It's an interesting process. I've always been one to I want to watch the evolution. I don't want it perfect. And then if I happen to get lucky that last sip or that second to last glass was the aha perfect moment, I'm okay with it, keeping on going. I experienced it.
And I think one of the things that whether you're at home or you want to try it out in a restaurant or something, is, open a bottle of wine, pour a half glass, a glass before you decant, and then pour some wine, and follow the two glasses and see, the wine that wasn't decanted versus the wine that was decanted. Do you see a difference? Whether it's a very, very young wine that might be a little bit closer, or is it an older wine to where that kind of arch of its breathability in the glass. As we have the time and we have the availability to kind of have some fun and do some at-home experiments, why not, right?
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely, and we're all home. We're all home right now, experimenting heavily with wine. If you look at the market trends, we all come out of this as sommeliers. So walk us through. What do you? I actually, before we dive too deep into 06, I would love to. 06 and 16 have really interesting similarities, and of course, being a decade apart, couldn't be more different. So we thought this would be an extraordinary opportunity for everyone to hear from an expert such as yourself, sort of how our wines are aging. What do you see as the commonalities, as the differences? How do you see 06? We literally just sort of said, okay, what's current release, and let's go back 10 years. And so we haven't necessarily cherry picked a vintage for you to try. We just sort of said, okay, let's do it. 10 years sounded even. Let's go for 10. I'm going to apologize to everybody right now. I know I'm going to upset everybody who's on the wine stream. Unfortunately, we do not have any 06 available for sale. So sorry, guys.
This one actually came out of the cage. Yeah. I mean, this one was straight from mom and dad's cellar. So
thank you, Mom and Dad, for letting us open this. And I'm sorry to everybody who doesn't have a bottle already in their house, because you can't get it anymore. But it's a great reference point for anyone who does happen to have this in their cellar, if they wanted to sort of see the update without having to pop the cork themselves. So please.
Well, moms and dads everywhere, Thank you.
Absolutely.
So what I did, obviously, I just decanted and got the 06 breathing. I've got the 16 in my glass here as well. I've had this in my glass for probably a little over an hour now, just because I wanted to give it a little bit of some air and just, check it, make sure everything was all good, and see its progression. If I'm doing a little analysis, the wines look fairly similar. You've got a really nice kind of dark, deep ruby core. The 2006 is showing that about a decade more of age. There's a little bit of that kind of softening of the color at the rim, which is something I would totally expect. Style-wise, there's a reason why I encourage people to always wait a little bit in drinking Napa Cabernet, because it just ages so beautifully. I think with the style, you get a good kind of core parallel of profile, flavor, and style, in that really kind of dark fruited profile, that kind of currant and black cherry and blackberry characteristic. What I really love here, which you can kind of, in the 16, you get it in a little bit more of an intense style that blends and melds and morphs itself into the 06, is that kind of dark baker's chocolate with that light kind of earth spice characteristic, which, when I think about it, Cabernet Sauvignon, warning, I'm going to be a wine geek for just a moment.
Please.
That's what this show's about.
It's literally called the wine stream. Yeah.
So Cabernet Sauvignon is in a category of wines, grapes that you would consider pyrazinic. And those pyrazine compounds can have some very, very kind of wide ranges. And when I think about the Cabernet family, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and pyrazines, I think about green notes. And when the wine is really out of balance and really kind of underripe and funky, it can be really off-putting, like those really, really gnarly bad green bell peppers. But when it's done really well, when you have a nice ripe and lush wine, these are kind of some of those characteristics that you get that kind of start to linger in, on the 16. It's that kind of little hint of like spearmint, menthol kind of characteristic that wraps itself around the fruit, kind of essences in with that kind of chocolatey richness. And then in the 06, all that kind of subdues and you still get that earthiness, but for me it kind of goes more into that morphing of a little bit of like that dried tobacco leaf, that leaf tile kind of characteristic. Almost think about like towards the end of the summer when you're, you know, driving through Napa and you start to smell a little bit of those kind of dried eucalyptus leaves and a bit of the kind of the leaves starting to kind of come to full ripening on the vine, and you get that little bit of earthiness that really kind of balances. So that's one of the things I really, really look at. And I see a really nice kind of progression through the glasses. In the 16, being a more youthful wine, a little bit fresher out of barrel, you get a little bit more kind of intensity of those oak spices, kind of those cardamoms, those cinnamons, those vanilla cloves. And then in the 06 is that this wine has had that, you know, 10 years difference of time to kind of soften and integrate. Those spice nuances soften a little bit and kind of round into the overall flavor and the overall palate of the wine in a really, really nice essence. It's great. Both wines are fantastic, and I think it's a really fun way to kind of try them side by side, because it's not often that people get that experience to where you can sit down and say, okay, let's try two different vintages of, in essence, the same wine that are 10 years apart.
Yeah, it is, and I tell you, it's one of the perks of being in the industry that I'll never stop appreciating. It's just this endless ability to point and counterpoint and test and taste. You know, it is so unnatural as a consumer or a collector to open up multiple bottles and pour them at the same time, right? And yet, you know, all of us professionals in the industry, sommeliers, winemakers, we're doing that all the time, right? We're popping multiple corks, we're pouring all the wines, we're tasting them back to back, and it's really the only way you pull your knowledge base forward. I always dare people, if you really want to just, you know, refine your palate, start buffing a lot of glass. Just empty your shelves and go for it. Yeah. And, you know, pour a splash of a whole lot of different bottles and you'll really learn quickly. It's so hard for the mind to remember what it tasted before and compare to what it's tasting now. But when it's back to back is when you really make all those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, people think the job or the life of a sommelier is very, you know, glamorous and everything. And but a lot of, I mean, the truth of it is a sommelier a lot of the time is a historian. You know, we're talking about older vintages. We're talking about different wines, different regions and things like that. So it takes a lot. I think the one thing I want to say that I think is really, really important to take away from, you know, doing this tasting, and I think just tastings like this in general, where you're comparing vintages, is one wine is not better than the other. You know, both of these wines are fantastic. They're just different. And I think sometimes we get into that mindset to where, you know, you taste through, you know, 5 vintages of a wine and you pick your favorite. Your favorite is your personal favorite. And I think that's what's important, is to do some tastings like this and to decide, you know, I know people, I have clients and guests and friends that they like that really rich, intense flavor of young Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. I know other people that their personal preference is at least 15 to 20 years old. Is one person right and is one person wrong? No, absolutely not. It's just understanding, you know, wine is a very personal thing, but it's one that can be shared at the same time. So don't say that one of these wines is better than the other, because they're both fantastic. It's just they're different because they're in a different stage in their evolution and in their life cycle.
Right.
I love to hear you say that. You know, I've always felt, I mean, having spent so much of my career traveling across the country, presenting wines to sommeliers every year and hearing sommeliers' responses, right? I mean, so much of my career is listening to the response and seeing how a sommelier is drinking and enjoying a wine. And I've always found the most sophisticated palates are those that will taste a wine, be very methodical, we'll be able to, like, just like you're doing, the perfect deconstruction of, notes, harmony, complexity, features, and then turn around and rather than say if they personally like it or not, say, I have a couple who comes in here at least twice a month who will adore this. And they're in their mind, they're not thinking I like this or I like that. It's which one of my guests, because I know my guests so well, have this profile of an interest. And that's for me just that's the high art that I've always admired so much, is to really be able to be non-judgmental of the style of the wine or the expression of the wine, and then to be able to then observe what other people are drinking and have that card catalog in your head of every one of your regulars and say, this one likes young, bold Cabernets.
Well, when we go to Gary Danko and you have somebody like Jeremiah, available to you, I love to just say, okay, look, here's my budget. Don't even bring me the list. Bring me something that is cool.
Wine me.
Yeah, wine me. Okay, wine me and feed me and just and I love that.
So Jeremiah, when you have a table that comes and says, I'm open to anything, wine me, what is one question that you ask in order to kind of get a temperature of what their taste is?
Love it. So that kind of, the thing that I love more than anything else is when the guest will kind of loosen the reins a little bit and say, like, let's have some fun. You've got a big wine list. I don't want to look at it. I want you to pick something for me. Beyond the minutia questions that you have to ask of do you prefer, do you want to start with sparkling? Do you prefer white or red? Those kinds of things to kind of figure out what, we know we're playing a sport. We just need to figure out what ballpark we're in, kind of deal. When I get to there's usually a couple questions depending upon, what my feel for with the couple, the group or whatnot is. Sometimes I'll ask them, depending upon their clues, what are you really into right now? Or have you ever heard of something like this? Or things of that nature, because I want to figure out, if somebody likes, bananas, I don't necessarily want to sell them a kiwi. They're both fruit, but they're very different styles of fruit. So sure. I try and take a little bit of that to heart. I will think about what they're eating to some extent. I do believe that there are certain wines that do work better with certain foods, but I think ultimately we're in a day and an age where wine pairings, some people really do care about them, but at the end of the day, some people, the golden rule is if you eat what you like and you drink what you like, you're going to like it. And that goes towards, if a guest is having a good time and having something that I wouldn't put together normally, doesn't matter, because it goes towards the, I'm not the one enjoying it. I'm enjoying the ability to give them the experience and give them the joy that is exceeding their expectations.
Well, and that's what makes Gary Danko so much fun. It's I love that. That's such a hallmark and a testament to what makes your restaurant so extraordinary. We have so many questions. I love it. I'm trying to, as you're talking, go through, and we have actually. Let's touch on the subject of pairing. One question that Ron asks, which I thought was pretty interesting, he says, when pairing wines with food, we commonly focus on the effect of the food on the wine, but how does the wine make the food taste differently?
Absolutely. So it's interesting, I've done a lot of food and wine pairings and, wine dinners and things like that. And there's two mindsets, if you're doing a wine dinner or something around a common theme, whether it be, Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon or, Pinot Noir from Burgundy or whatever it is, then you're kind of in a little bit of a narrower frame. To whereas, what I do in the restaurant a lot of the times is people will pick their, 4 or 5 courses, and it will, one table will be very different than another table. And I'm thinking on the fly of, what do I have available for me? What do I know goes with certain dishes, and how do I change that? For thinking about it, the wine is the wine. So if the wine is kind of the focal point, then it comes down to changing the food or the menu a little bit. Whereas if the food or the menu is the focus, then you have to change your kind of scope or outlook on what you want the wine to do. My overall philosophy is one of harmony. So I want, the food to be good. And luckily, I work at a restaurant where I know that's always going to be solidified.
Check.
Yeah. Number two, I want the wine to be good. Whatever it is, wherever it's from, whoever makes it, it goes back to I'm going to taste the wine, and I'm going to analyze it for, is it a good representation of what it is, and move forward with that. So I have these two good things. When they go together, I want them to kind of go to a new level. So, what I do is anytime we have a new dish, I will taste anywhere from about 3 to 7 or 8 different wines with it, just to kind of figure out, okay, well, this dish, it leans a little heavy on the mushroom earth component, or the herbaceousness is very heavy. The component of this is more subtle, but if you put this with it, then it really spikes, so that I know where my boundaries are and what can happen, because knowing the person, the place, and the thing, everything going together, I may have more than one different option to put with that dish to highlight it the way that I and they want it to kind of be elevated.
That's so well said. I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't believe we've chatted for an hour, and I could keep on going for another hour, but to respect the time of our viewers, I think we are coming to an end. Thank you, Jeremiah. Before you go, though, I wanted you to share with everybody an update. I understand that unfortunately, San Francisco, you guys are not open yet, and the restaurant is not quite open. But if I remember correctly, you've got a pretty cool wine club offering that opening up your cellar. Why don't you share with all of our viewers a little bit about your program that you have going on at Gary Danko?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So what we're doing, obviously, indoor dining in San Francisco is not available yet, and we do not do or offer outside dining. So one of the things that we've done is I've created a wine club at the restaurant, which is a monthly subscription. We're not doing a minimum of 6 or 12 months. People can go month by month if they choose. It's a 4-bottle selection once a month at either the palate lessons level, which is $100 a month, which is going to be, kind of some of those lesser known grape varietals, fun up and coming regions, cool producers, things of that nature, to really just kind of give you the opportunity to try stuff, much as if you were in my restaurant and you came in and you wanted a recommendation. Yeah. Some of the things that I would say, I'm really excited about this right now or that right now, you should try this. And then the other level is the Cellar Thief Wine Club, which is $200 a month. And that's going to be some maybe more rare producers, some classic regions, but some of the allocated options that I get limited accessibility to. Still on either level, I'm driving, great value. I'm driving towards wines that I'm really excited about. I'm the one picking the wines. So it's all, every bottle is something I stand behind. And I'm doing, write-ups on each wine, including some wine pairing options. Just a really great way to kind of keep people in the loop and keep our friends and our guests kind of connected. So if it's something that's of interest, currently putting together options to do shipping. We've for the first couple of months, we've just done an on-site pickup at the restaurant. But please feel free to email me, wine@garydanko.com. And I'd love to give you some more information and hopefully sign some people up and share some tasty bottles in the future.
So cool.
Great.
It sounds like such a great way to diversify your cellar to some things that you wouldn't normally buy yourself. You know, that's pretty cool.
Exactly. I mean, like for instance, in the last one of the groups added a really awesome white blend from one of my favorite Barolo producers, Palmaz Cabernet, out of Piedmont in northwestern Italy. It's the white wine that the family makes, and it's just an awesome like Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc blend. It's just delicious. So kind of having some fun with it, to say the least.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can't wait. I know I'll be joining. We, as producers, we get stuck in our rut all the time, and I'm always looking forward to opportunities to be able to taste what other great palates such as yourself are tasting. So yeah, count me in. And we have a lot of, actually, it's amazing to see on the chat. People are just loving. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. We look forward to having you back someday. We look forward to being back at your restaurant. And until then, stay safe and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on. Awesome.
Well, that's such a pleasure. I will never tire of listening to great palates taste wines and talk about them. Just that perfect harmony between the intellectual and the sensory. It's really such a pleasure. So I'm sure we'll make sure and put on the link when we post this. We'll have his information on there. So if anyone is interested, you can always go check out wines@GaryDanko.com or check out their website. I do believe he's going to be posting that wine club offering on there. And hopefully he will be opening soon so that we can all get back to his restaurant. In the meantime, I know that like I mentioned, we're not making the 2006 available. I'm sorry, but we do have the 16 and the 17 Riesling available. So if anyone is interested in acquiring any one of those bottles, of course, they're available online. They're available via our ambassadors as well. And feel free to give us a call, and we'd be
There is one thing to note. While we were pulling the listings on the 16. This is not for everybody, but it turns out for the first time in history, we bottled 8 6-liters. This is not normally something we do. So again, not for everybody, but for those who need something to park in the corner of a room, the 6-liter is pretty impressive. And if you're planning that big blowout post-COVID party at your house, it's a great way to feed a lot of people. So anyways, thought I'd throw that on the listing.
Now, does the 6-liter require the holster to pour, or that's the 9-liter?
I think, you need a buddy.
Get me started. I've always wanted to make a wine holster. Someday I'm going to find a leather worker to make me my holster. But so yes, feel free to reach out to us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all join us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at the winery or virtually. Next week, we will be doing a virtual tasting party. So keep an eye out. We're actually going to be able to ship to all of you tasting samples, and we'll actually make this interactive and have some fun. Hopefully we'll have the ambassadors on. We thought we would join everyone else who's doing virtual tastings. We are now offering that here at the winery week in, week out. We've gotten really quite good at it. The ambassadors are getting really good at their selfie sticks. So we figured we'd share in the fun and have a virtual wine tasting party next week. Keep a lookout for notices on that, and we look forward to seeing you all back here next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific time. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.